This is the Ferrari F50, the successor to one of the greatest cars the prancing horse ever produced. A Formula 1 inspired, Pininfarina styled, V12 powered, hyper-rare supercar that failed to hit the mark. So how did this iconic Ferrari fall short of expectations, and why is it so often overlooked? Now, the F50 wasn't a complete failure. For starters, Ferrari's marketing know-how hit a hole in one. The F50 had a very limited run. Just 349 cars were made. Peanuts when you compare it to the F40. And given how Ferrari market these cars, an existing fan base of enthusiastic buyers was guaranteed. It also destroyed the competition at the sticker. Set at a mere $475,000, the F50 was cheaper than all of its rivals. McLaren's bonkers F1 would hit your checkbook for $815,000. Elon Musk famously paid $1 million for his McLaren F1, a car limited to just 106 examples.
For $1 million.
Jaguar's superfast XJ220 had a list price of over $600,000, and the Bugatti EB110, the supercar set to relaunch the brand, was $350,000, less than the Ferrari. But Bugatti of the 90s was nothing like Bugatti today. This price tag, limited run in comparison to recent Ferraris, and exclusive appeal made the F50 a very attractive buy for those lucky enough to get a chance. For their money, buyers would get one of the greatest sounding engines of the era. Unlike its predecessor, the F50 packed a 4.7-litre, 65-degree V12 that was a direct descendant of Ferrari's 3.5-litre V12 used in the 1990 641 Formula 1 car. The sound it produced was unlike anything else, as close to a Formula 1 car for the road as you could get.
There was a ghost! There's ectoplasm!
The engine shared the same unique 5-valve per cylinder design, similar nodular cast iron block, Nicosil cylinder coating, and titanium connecting rods as Alan Prost's Formula 1 car. Of course, most parts were strengthened and redesigned to provide durability necessary for a road car. Those Formula 1 engines only needed to last 200 miles. The highest mileage F50 to date has north of 55,000 miles on the clock. Safe to say the engineers got those durability redesigns spot on. The engine was also a record setter. By road car standards, it set new records for its redline and specific output, an insane 110 horsepower per litre of naturally aspirated goodness, something Ferrari would continue to be known for decades to come. The F50 also embraced a more refined cockpit than that found in the F40, the centerpiece being a digital dashboard, itself a thing of beauty. The elegant font and sci-fi bar readouts fit the 90s perfectly. The F50 maybe has one of the best instrument clusters ever made. It looks like it was designed for a video game. Things only got better when you took a look under the skin. Like the McLaren F1, the F50 was all carbon fibre, but Ferrari would take their design a step beyond the British supercars. Ferrari would bolt that 4.7-litre V12 directly to the carbon fibre tub, making not only the engine, but by extension the gearbox, structural elements. They even attached the rear suspension to the transmission, much in the same way Formula 1 cars did. The F50 was so much faster than the F40 when it came to track work, posting times closer to Le Mans racing cars than road-going supercars, thanks in part to its setup and suspension lifted from Ferrari's Formula 1 experiences. The F50 was truly a Formula 1 car for the road. This setup brought incredible strength to the body, while saving precious weight, but it wasn't without its downsides.
Oh, here we go with that again! Yes!
This setup translated road vibrations directly to the tub, making its ride quality significantly worse. As a result, and despite being groundbreaking, this setup was not used on any other Ferrari. Despite that, this combination allowed Ferrari and the F50 to be one of the few profitable supercars of its generation, but all this came at a cost. Now, the F50 was always up against it before the pencil even hit the paper. Ferrari's limited edition supercar roster, containing the likes of the 288 GTO and the F50's older brother, the F40, this was always going to cast a very large shadow over anything that followed. The bar for a follow-up to maybe the greatest supercar of all time would be astronomically high. And to make matters worse, Ferrari couldn't have picked a worse time to launch a hyper-exotic supercar.
But I'd like the point to get across that we have a great country, but it's not going to be great for long if we're going to continue to lose $200 billion a year. You're going to get into the early 90s, 1990, 1991.
1995 was not the year to launch a new supercar. 5 years previously, the world had gone through an oil crisis, known as the 1990 oil shock. The cause was Iraq's invasion of the oil-rich nation of Kuwait, causing oil prices to double over a 9-month period. On its own, this might have been okay, but years earlier, the world's banks, battling decades-long inflation, had brought in strict measures to bring the economy back under control. This oil shock turned into an oil slick, and Ferrari's plans, along with the world's economies, went down the toilet. But this is a car video about the F50, so why are we talking about global banking and politics? Well, because this was the landscape that the F50 was launched into, a belt-tightening era where flashy supercars became more and more a luxury only the super elite could access. The problem for the F50 was that those limited buyers also had other options. McLaren had launched their car a few years earlier. The F1 was a record breaker, claiming the Guinness World Record for the world's fastest production car when it reached 240.1 miles per hour. A nice top trump for any millionaire to swing around the room at the country club.
You're in big trouble though, pal. I eat pieces of like you for breakfast.
You eat pieces of for breakfast?
No.
That price tag we mentioned earlier was also bragging rights for the lucky few who managed to get their hands on an F1. As exclusive as the F50 was, it couldn't compete with the McLaren on either exclusivity or performance stats. You see, for all the positives of the Formula 1 derived V12, its bite was not as impressive as its bark. The F50 produced a very respectable and healthy 512 horsepower, a 40-something horsepower boost over the F40, if you believe Ferrari's figures. But that naturally aspirated F1 engine had less torque. A lot less. At 347 pound-feet for the F40's twin-turbo fueled 426, this meant the F50 was a totally different driving experience. The F50 was much more suited to the track than the F40, in part thanks to its suspension, but this change away from blunt force trauma made the F50 feel totally different. The face-ripping turbo punch the F40 was known for was gone. Ferrari would famously deny journalists the chance to road test the F50, apparently because they knew it was noticeably slower and less ferocious than its older brother in a straight line. This was never confirmed, but some reported that the F50 was not as fast as the F40, and this was the reason behind the block. Only Ferrari can confirm or deny this. It wasn't just the engine that caused the F50 to be slower than the F40. The F50's waistline was also part of the problem. You see, the draw of the F40 was its stripped-out, no-frills race car for the road appeal, and that means lightweight. The F50 tried to do the same thing, whilst carrying around a whole 300 extra pounds. Even with its space-age tub design and Formula 1 parts bin, the much larger and heavier F50 just didn't seem to be the step forward on the F40 when it came to pure stats and straight-line thrills. It was also a gamble for Ferrari to try and pull all of this Formula 1 knowledge into a road car, a gamble that in some ways paid off, but in others did not. And this brings us to the biggest elephant in the room when talking about the F50, its looks. The obvious place to start would be the exterior, but let's just head back inside the cockpit, shall we? The F50's carbon tub design was excellent for strength, and was one of the reasons it handled so well on track, but it made the F50 incredibly cramped inside. The F50 was as snug as they come. It also had zero storage solutions, no big gulp holders inside. One of the biggest storage overlooks was the roof. The F50 was originally only offered as a barchetta, or open-top, two-seater sports car. Not a problem if you live in certain parts of the world, but for 99% of owners, this meant they could really take their cars outside, if they wanted to take this super exotic outside of its air-conditioned surroundings, that is. Ferrari would fix this by offering a carbon roof, but because the car had long left the drawing board, there was nowhere to store it. If you ventured out without a roof, you best hope the weather stayed on your side. As for exterior styling, we will let you take to the comments and share which of the two cars you think has the better looks. Ferrari would go on to make 3 F50 GT cars, said to be some of the fastest cars to ever lap Ferrari's test track. The GT would be axed shortly after its inception, a shame, as it was probably the F50 variant that could have challenged the legacy of the F40 as the most bonkers road-going race car of the time. It definitely looked the part, and if it did find its way to a limited production run, it might have become a bigger Halo car than the F40. Who knows what might have happened. So the F50 was a track-focused Formula 1 testbed, created to enhance Ferrari's exclusive offering of high-performance machines. A flawed beast that had as many positives as negatives, but a car that, unlike the F40 that we covered here, doesn't get the love it probably deserves. In part, down to rivals like the McLaren F1, the F50 was a continuation of Ferrari brilliance that maybe arrived a little too late to really make the impact most expected it to.